Hey, everybody, welcome to this week's Fateless podcast episode. Joining me from the Fateless team, we've got Sham and Aaron. And then our special guest for this episode is going to be Jessica. So, Jessica, I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself a little bit.
Hi, thanks for having me, guys. I'm super excited. I'm Jessica Slowinski. I have been a game writer, narrative designer for almost 20 years now. Crazy how time flies. I got hired right out of school to work at BioWare, and without making the
Nice.
introduction to myself too long, I'm going to tell you the insane story of how I got hired at BioWare. I was a youngin. I didn't know what I didn't know with complete blind youthful optimism. I saw BioWare had an opening and I was like, I'm gonna apply, even though I have zero game experience, zero professional writing experience. And at the time they required you to do a Neverwinter Nights module as part of your application process. And I had finished this module and I sent it in virtually. And then I got super paranoid that somehow it wasn't going to work because virtual applications this is how old I am. We were sort of new at the time. So I was like, I'm going to do a paper one too. So I do the paper application. I'm like, how am I going to send this module? And I needed some kind of format to burn it on. What I had laying in the house were SpongeBob SquarePants themed mini CDs. Does anyone remember mini CDs? Like they were like half the size and they worked the
Not
same.
just CDs, but mini CDs.
Yeah, it was a
dude.
mini CD. It was SpongeBob SquarePants themed mini CD. It was the only thing I had, and I was a poor college student. I was like, this will work. So I just burned the module on this. I put it all in a manila envelope and I mail it off to Edmonton. I'm like, great.
That's too funny. So actually, that's so funny because I feel like that it's contextually a little bit about what we were talking about a minute ago.
Yeah.
You know, about putting a little bit of yourself. Because I bet that might have been one of the reasons you got the job. They were probably like, "This is awesome. All right, hire this person."
It's actually a godsend I did that because apparently the virtual thing didn't go through. Nobody got it. Somebody in Edmonton got the envelope, found it. They were like, oh, this is for the job in Austin. Mailed it to Austin. And then I got hired. So yeah, that's crazy. But so got hired at BioWare. I spent the next 20 years. I did a 10 stint in mobile. Those were exciting times. And not out of any kind of like conscious choice to focus on licenses, but I just sort of ended up working on a lot of big licenses. Star Wars was the first at BioWare. I got to work on Star Trek, got to work on Game of Thrones, The Walking Dead, Archer. That was so much fun.
Archer, let's go.
And then it all came full circle and I got to do a SpongeBob game. Let's see. And then I worked on the KOTOR remake when I came back to AAA. I worked on Jeff Gardner's startup, Something Wicked Games, Weird Song, developing a new IP. That was a lot of fun. And I'm sure you guys are having lots of fun developing yours. I worked on the next Bioshock game for a while. And now I'm at Saber working on Jurassic Park Survival. You can watch a trailer for that. Look up stuff on that. Quick plug. And that is me. I have seen a lot and done a lot, and I'm excited to talk about it with you.
So it sounds like recommendation for you for people that are trying to get a gig is send a small themed CD to the wrong person.
Yeah.
And chances are you'll get hired. That's what I'm hearing, right?
The wrong office. And
Do any of us even have disc drives anymore to actually view something like that?
No.
I think I might have one somewhere, in the basement somewhere, like.
Yeah, you have to buy it as a separate peripheral now. Like they don't even offer it. Like if you buy it
with the USB, and then you'll be like, oh, it's just USB, and you're like, oh my laptop only has USB-C, so I have to get a USB-C converter to have the USB 2, and you're like, all right.
Do any of you remember the last time you used the disc? I actually do remember the last time I used the disc.
I don't.
I installed the Diablo 3 in like 2011 with a disc. That's the last time I used it.
That's the last time. And then you were like, CDs are done.
I still use music CDs, like if I'm buying an album. But that's about
wow, that's cool.
In the car, or do you have like a
Well, I'll buy them and then I'll rip them onto my computer, and then I have them. Then I have them digitally.
Yeah, same. I do the same. Yeah.
So you guys are like, no, screw you, Apple, screw you, Spotify, screw you. I'm going CD. I'm gonna take it on my computer.
So anti-subscription. That's one of the ways you can tell how old I am. I can't. I'm not gonna pay you every month.
But to be real, what you're basically saying is like, I want to directly, specifically support this exact artist, not the aggregate of
And I
Spotify,
want to
whatever it is.
own it because there's nothing that annoys me more than when I have like a comfort show on Netflix and they're like, "Oh, it's gone," and I'm like, "How am I gonna watch
Yeah.
the comfort show?"
Yeah. How
And
do I get The
especially if
Office?
you
Whatever.
already had a collection, right? Like I'm a big soundtrack
Yeah.
collector.
Yeah.
So I had a huge collection of soundtracks. So yeah, burn all that onto my computer and then I can listen to it in my car, through some Google app or whatever. But yeah, I agree with Jessica. I don't like signing up for any kind of subscription because they can yank it anytime that they want. They can go belly up, whatever. I will always have my CD that I can play whenever I want.
Yes.
Yeah, we were talking about that with Amazon. Like whenever we go to watch a movie, we're like, oh, we really want to watch this movie, and it's like, oh, we don't. It's not anywhere. Fine, we'll just buy it, right? So you just go, and Amazon knows. They say like, okay, we'll rent this to you for $3.99, but you could buy it for $4.99, and you're like, I mean, I can't say no. Of course, I'm gonna pay the extra dollar. But then to your point, it's like, but what if they decided, nah, we don't have the rights for that anymore? Like, what happens to my?
Yeah, it's gone.
I don't know. I don't actually know what
Yeah.
happens. So,
Yeah.
Or if they just stop doing their video service, they just stop supporting it.
yeah, they're like, nah,
Exactly.
I'm done with that.
Exactly.
But tell me, Jessica, what was like if you had to pick one? This will be a fun one. What's the one story that like kind of stuck with you the most, like or writing piece? You know what I mean? Like what was the one piece of work that you had to do or wanted to do that you were like, this is incredible, I love it, this was the most fun or whatever?
Oh gosh. Sadly, I think the true answer to that stuff is stuff that never got shipped. Those are the ones that
That
hurt,
makes sense.
that you really want the world to see. But of the things that did get shipped, I think I'm actually really proud of, and sadly you can't play it anymore because it got sunset right around when the show ended. But I was really proud of Game of Thrones Ascent, which was the mobile game we had based on the TV show. And at the time, it was only like season 2 of the TV show had just come out. It was just being a hit. Like the whole Game of Thrones world was like blowing up. And we were the only video game in town for a long time for Game of Thrones. So like everybody was playing Game of Thrones Ascent. So we're the only one. And we had, pretty good access to Game of Thrones. This was before all the leaks happened and they really started butting up. So we got to go to HBO and watch the show before.
No way. That's sick.
It was a sidebar, but it was so funny because we were watching screeners and the screeners were like pre VFX or anything. So you'd be seeing scenes where like Dany's supposed to be petting the dragon, but she's petting like a big green stick, or like people are supposed to be reacting to it flying around. And it's just a big traffic cone that says Drogon. So it's like all the gravitas.
Wait. Is there like a guy like in like
yeah,
one of those cool suits like running around?
Yeah, he's in cargo shorts and a t-shirt, and he's just like, you're like, man, actors like props to him. I don't know how they.
Yeah, you're like.
I just be laughing my butt off at work every day. Anyway, but yeah, so that game, we had a really unique thing where we wanted you to be able to. It was a little bit of like Rosencrantz and Guildenstern in Westeros, in that your character was like a noble who chose one of the great houses to support, and you were always kind of like in the background and the sidelines on these major events you were seeing happening in the show, and you actually played a big role in them, but it was unseen on the show. And so to make that happen, we would watch the show, and then we'd go back and we'd make content based on the episode. And then we always release it the Monday morning after the show aired. So you'd watch the show, and then Monday morning we'd be like, play the show, except your special part in it that you didn't know about that you didn't get to see on the show. Come play it. And people loved that, and we loved doing it. And it was just really rewarding and awesome to be able to make that happen. I know people have their own mixed feelings about how the show ended. But we got, we got a lot of positive praise for how we handled it in our game. So that felt really good. What was really challenging though was, they started having all these leaks, and then they got really buttoned up about security. So they started saying that we couldn't watch the episodes ahead of time anymore. But we had already established this content cadence, and we really didn't want to stop it because people loved it and we loved it. And we were like, okay, we're going to do this hardcore. So we'd watch it Sunday ourselves with everybody else in the world. I'd be sitting there with my laptop, and I'm watching it, and I'm like narrative designing the content as I'm watching it. I'm like, here's what it's gonna be. And then, we'd have, and we on that whole week, we'd work on it. We'd develop it and we'd write it and we'd test it and we'd implement it. And then we would release it Friday. So like 2 days before the next episode. Whatever.
You guys were the South Park.
Yeah, we were.
That's the way they do it, right?
It's the South Park method. Yeah. So and
That's
it was
crazy.
intense, but yeah, people loved it and we were able to keep it going. So yeah. Yeah, so that was probably one of the more memorable things that has actually been released in my career was
Well,
that.
so this is a question for both of you guys. Like when you're coming into something like that, like I'd love to understand how you get into the style, into the tempo, the tone, the feeling of someone else's writing, like really translating that. So like, because it's almost like you're playing telephone with the way that the world should feel in a sense, right? It's like it's written, then it was translated into a show. I'm guessing the show is kind of like we're going back to this for the most part. That was what people were most connected to. So the show, and then you're saying, okay, now I'm gonna turn that into a video game, and I'm gonna give these characters a voice, and I'm gonna give them lines that no one else, they didn't say them in the show. I'm presumably
Right.
maybe you took some. Like, how do you get in the mode of that, right? Do you try it? Like, well, I'll just leave it open. Like, how would you do that?
Yeah. I mean, for me, I feel like I was developing these skills when I was young and I didn't know it yet. Through the avenue of fan fiction. Because when I was young, I wrote a lot of fan fiction, and the whole thing about fan fiction, good fan fiction, is the best feels like missing chapters or episodes or whatever of whatever it's based on. Like it could fit right in seamlessly. You could absolutely see this having happened or being written or whatever it's based on. And that's the hallmark of the good stuff, right? And so when you're a fan fiction writer, you want to be part of the good stuff. So you're constantly trying to develop those skills of like picking up an ear or an eye for like, what does this typically look like? What does this sound like? What feels right? Like what fits right into this world? And I didn't realize it at the time, but I feel like a lot of that was building some early muscles for what I'd later have to do working on licensed games. It's a lot of research. Just like if you're doing an original IP that's set in Portugal, for example, which was what the Something Like Games Weird Song was, we do research on real world Portugal. Licensed games are kind of no different. You're just doing research on that fictional world, right? Like you really got to dive in and like study it as if it's its own country or period in history, and you want to understand everything about it. You want to understand why it is the way it is. You want to understand why the people there talk the way they do, why they look the way they do, why they move the way they do. Once you understand that, you can then start to develop writing or creating content in that world, and you never get it right the first time. Even after all that research, you never get it exactly right the first time. It takes you a little bit of time and feedback to like dial it in and get it to where it feels exactly right. But yeah, so that's kind of how I approach it, and I think something that gave me a little bit of success. So if anyone's out there feeling like, I don't know, cringe or weird about doing fan fiction or fan art, don't, because I think that's a great way to start, to especially with licenses, build those skills, and it's a great way to just get started by doing something you're passionate about.
It's almost like building up a tuning fork for like voice, right? So like, okay, I want this to sound the same, to resonate the same. Yeah. What about you, Aaron? How do you approach it?
Yeah, I'm very similar to what Jessica said. For her it was, fan fiction. For me, it was role-playing games, right? So if I saw a movie or a show that I really liked, I would run a game that had some of those same emotions,
setting, right?
feelings, the pacing. And so I come to the writing from a screenwriter's point of view, right? I went to school to study screenwriting and film and such. And so yeah, my approach is very much, how do these characters talk? What emotions do they evoke when they talk? What's the cadence that they use to talk? Tyrion speaks in a very specific way. He says very specific things. And if you study that, then you're able to reproduce it faithfully. If somebody would immediately know if Tyrion was saying something that Tyrion normally wouldn't say. That's one thing that audiences are very good at. They may not be able to articulate it the way a writer would, but they know it. They know when something doesn't seem right. There's a great
like The Witcher. Have you guys seen the Witcher trailer?
For the new one. You
mean
mean
the new one with Hemsworth?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
I've
haven't
not
watched the show. I don't want to. I haven't watched the show. I've only seen the trailer.
I can't imagine. I mean, Cavill, and I am a fan of Henry Cavill. Cavill did such a distinct Geralt that either Hemsworth is just going to copy what he does, which I understand he does not do, or he's going to have to do something different, and then it's going to feel like, and they did it successfully with the James Bond franchise, obviously, right? James Bonds are very different one from another. But yeah, I don't know about. I have not seen the new season, and I probably won't see the new season.
I'm gonna watch it. I'm gonna give you guys that time. Okay, Witcher. I'm gonna give you that time. But when they have he has this one line, he comes up and he's like, "Let's effing go," and I'm like, "Huh? That's not."
Yeah.
To your point, like the tuning fork. I'm like, "What? That's not Geralt at all." Like
that's exactly correct, right? And that's what I mean. Like, when something, so he would get some bit of news, the Cavill version, right? It'd be like, fuck. And he has such a specific way that he embodies that character that you're just at that point, you're just a caricature. You have to do what he's doing to be Geralt. Otherwise, you're some different interpretation of it. But I don't know. What do you think, Jessica?
Yeah, I haven't. I did watch the Henry Cavill version. I haven't seen the Hemsworth version other than
watch the trailer for sure.
Other than the key art they've been from the key art, I was like, he looks about the same. So I was like, he's fine visually. But yeah, that whole thing. I obviously don't work on The Witcher, and I don't know other than what you read in People magazine. But like, as I understand, there's a whole can of worms that might be contributing to some uncanny valley there, right? Because the whole story has been, that Henry Cavill is meticulous about sticking to his vision of Geralt and how he interprets the books, and constantly being like, "You wouldn't do this, you wouldn't do this." And the show people want to run off and they want to make their own kind of thing. They don't want to always be so beholden to the books. So if Hemsworth is coming off as not quite right, it could have not so much to do with the fact that they changed the actor, but that the actor that they now have is not being as meticulous about how,
right.
And he's more willing to say what they want him to say and do what they want him to do. And so, I'm like, it's a whole mess of reasons why it might come off as different, but it might be one of those things too, where like it feels uncanny valley for like 4 episodes, and then you're just like, all right,
and you move on.
I'm used to it.
Yeah.
Do you have you guys dealt with a situation kind of like that where somebody thinks that they've now become the character that they're supposed to be representing from a voice acting or if it was actual screen? Have you ever had dealt with anything like that? I imagine it's quite different in games. You basically just say like, "Hey, say these lines. We're going to put them when we want to put them." Like, that's not your thing.
I've had it in a positive way. Like on our game Star Trek Timelines, we had this sort of unique partnership with John Delancey, the actor who plays Q.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
He was not only sort of the narrator, master of ceremonies, main communicative character in that game, but he also decided that he wanted to get involved in like the development of the story. Like he wanted to like learn more about development. So he and I would work together on the story. And then when we go into VO sessions, like he is this character, right? He's the only one who's ever played him. He's the one who has the most knowledge of him and why he is the way he is and why he developed this character and basically. So there really is no better authority on Earth on Q than the guy who played him. So we get in the booth and I'd have written something or whatever and on the day, and he'd be like, I'd have it in my head as him saying it a certain way or why he was doing it, or I'd word it a certain way. And in the booth, he'd be like, well, here's what I want to do with it and why. And all the time, the minute he said it, I was like, oh, yes, that makes sense. And I was like, nobody knows this guy better than this guy. And it was really cool in a positive way that he was there to find that nuance and the subtle differences between what you as even, a dedicated content creator wants to get it right can maybe not find as much as the guy who has embodied this person, who is this person.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so cool. I mean, I feel like that must have been that things like that are super rewarding when you're it's like almost like what you've written or what you've done is very appreciated, but it's like okay, but we can level it because I have this very direct experience with you know literally being this character. That's awesome. So on the other side, on the flip side, what about worst experiences? What are the one? I mean, and you don't have to name any specifics if you don't want to. If you want to, it's fine. Great. We like to dish here, but
I want to jump in real quick though and say that, I had a great experience where, similar to what Jessica said, the actor brought something different than what I was expecting. I had a voice in my head, and when I was writing the lines, it sounded a certain way. It was for the characters for New World, for the character of Imhotep. And I had an idea of who he was, and he had a bunch of dialogue. We had a fantastic voice actor. And when he came in and started reading the lines and started talking about the lines and the character, he completely changed my mind. I'm like, oh my gosh, no, I'm wrong. It's exactly the way this voice actor says it should be. And he brought a contemplative nature and a vulnerability to it that I honestly just had not put in there initially, right?
Yeah.
My Imhotep was much more arrogant. He was much more sure of himself.
Yeah.
And no, his way was 1,000 times better.
Templative architect type of thing. That's
yes,
cool.
I love those. When you have that kind of experience where you bring your best A game, but the actor also brings their best A game, and then those two meld, man, you get some really magical performances, I think, at moments like that.
That's amazing.
But I'll let Jessica talk about her worst experience. I don't know that I want to talk about mine. But
I've been lucky in terms
a bad one. Doesn't be the worst.
Yeah, in terms of working with actors, I've never had a bad experience with an actor. I've been, knock on all the things.
Same.
I've never had a bad experience with that. I have had certain licensors that I felt more in conflict.
Phixion?
That I felt more in conflict with than others on terms of what the brand was, and it's a sticky thing, because ultimately the licensor is always right. Whether they are or not, they are. Because you have to abide by their vision of the license at the end of the day. But that said, there are certain licensing teams where the people who are on the license team are not necessarily, and it's the same in games, right? Like it's not always a fact that the people who are working on it are people who know it very well, are people who are passionate about it, are people who care all that much about it, to be honest. And that, that's just a reality of many working situations, right? Like you love to have an ideal situation where everyone there like loves and is passionate and is, committed to the collective vision, but that's not always what happens either on games or on the licensing arm of certain places. So I've had certain there was one guy I won't say which game or what it was, but there was one game I had where this reviewer was supposedly reviewing all the content that we'd send him that we wanted to release every week and reading it word for word and signing off on it. And we rarely ever got notes from this person, which we were like, great, we're doing great. And then one day he came back with a note and he said, who's this character? And this character was the main antagonist of like half a year's worth of content that this guy had supposedly been reading all this time. And I struggled like really hard with how to respond.
How do you answer that question?
Yeah, I was like, how do I say this in a way that doesn't make him look stupid? Because there's no way
I'm sure.
He doesn't look stupid or like he's not doing his job.
Tell me this wasn't like in like a group email where it's like his boss is there and he's like
it wasn't, thank God for his sake. Yeah. But I was like, that's our main villain. Been in everything I've sent you for 6 months, and he was like, "Oh, okay."
That was it. Oh, okay. Nice.
I was like, okay. So
just kept moving. He's like,
right.
I mean, at that point, you just have to keep moving because what are you gonna say? oh, sorry, you caught me. I haven't read anything that you
Yeah,
sent me.
it all,
Yeah.
and that didn't happen. Yeah, so
Was it
that's
resolved? I mean, did you eventually explain who this guy was?
I
I
did,
mean,
and
no,
his
Okay.
response was okay.
Okay. All right. Okay. Cool. So that had a happy ending. Okay.
Yeah. So so that's more in my realm of negative experience, I guess, is occasions where it didn't quite feel like we were all on the same page, or
you know, maybe that's again, you can feel some true and visceral trust coming from that individual, you know, that
yeah,
they're like, you know what, they've got it. I don't
But
need to
no,
read any of this stuff.
feedback is where I would have, I'd say my worst experiences are, because you always have somebody that comes in and either, like Jessica said, they read it, they didn't really read it, they skimmed it, and then suddenly they've read it and go, wait, no, I have some notes, kind of a thing. And for the most part, the producers that I've worked with, leads that I've worked with, have been fantastic. You know, they're very collaborative. They want to know what's going on. They want to understand the character. But every now and then you get a note where you're just like, no, that's not, you're not, there's a disconnect here, and I'm not sure where it is. But your suggestion, there's a great quote from Neil Gaiman, who I love as a writer. I know there's some issues, but I love Neil Gaiman as a writer. And he said, when a knowledgeable person tells you that something isn't working about your story, they're almost always right. When they tell you how to fix it, they're almost always wrong. Um, and I love that saying, and I apply it to my work every day, because it's the note behind the note kind of a thing. Somebody may say, this isn't working for me, and then they try to be helpful and say, but why don't you try this? And it never helps. It like rarely helps. That is not the
That's,
way
you're
to
like, that's
handle
way
the
worse.
problem.
But I'd
Yeah,
like
yeah,
the
yeah, exactly. So they want to help. They want to offer a suggestion, but no, listen to what they're saying. Listen to what they say is not working, and then you, with your team or whatever, you find out a better way to do it, or you clarify something, or you make something stronger, or whatever it is. But yeah, rarely do you say, yeah, we should just give this character a talking monkey, like he said. That's a great idea.
perfect.
Which is a note, by the way, that we got on a script. Why don't you give Nikola Tesla a talking monkey? And we
I mean,
just
I'm
sort
a
of
little
nodded.
disappointed, if I'm honest,
We
that this
we
did not
nodded in the
happen.
meeting. We nodded. We went, oh, interesting. Of course, we had
Mm.
no intention of giving Nikola Tesla a talking monkey, but
Did you
yeah,
give
that
the
we did. Yeah. No. That's
mm.
one of the first things they teach you when you're dealing with producers, especially in the Hollywood arena. You do that a lot. You go, oh, interesting. You nod and then you pretend like you're writing something,
I
right?
know, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Not doing
But
talking monkey,
yeah.
ridiculous idea.
Otherwise they think they're not being listened to, and that you never want that, right? As a narrative lead, you never want to feel that the leads are not being listened to. Never, ever, ever. That is a horrible thing. So you want them to feel that they're being listened to, and then you want them to know that you're taking their critique seriously. But then it's up to you as the narrative lead to come up with a solution. How do you
Yeah.
fix what the problem is? But anyway,
So
that's my worst experience, is getting feedback that just was not at all good.
I feel like there's some worse experiences, but I'm gonna let you off the hook, because I think that because you're probably that tells me that there's some spice
Well,
to the story.
understand. I mean, narrative until recently, and Jessica, disagree with me if you wish, but narrative has not been that important in games. We've both been in games for a long time. You know, I've also been in it in 20 plus years. And so narrative now has gotten a lot of attention. There's awards, there's people talk about it, people make videos about it. But back in the day, narrative was almost sometimes like an afterthought. They would bring you in just to write dialogue for this character. You know, well, they need to be
I don't know,
saying
stuff
something.
it in, make that character do
Exactly. Okay,
something.
all your base are belong to us. All right, fine. And but now my point is that narrative leads had very little power, and probably still have very little power. But now more people are listening to them. There's more weight given to that discipline. There's much more experienced people coming in that are doing the job. And so now I feel that we're a more co-equal branch of government than in days past. But what do you agree with that, Jessica?
Yeah, I think too, narrative is becoming a differentiator more than it used to be. Now that our industry is sort of maturing. I think for a long time there was a lot of newness in terms of gameplay mechanics. There was a lot of newness in terms of visuals. There was a lot of newness in terms of all sorts of factors that didn't have much to do with the narrative. And so there were all sorts of reasons to check out a new project that had nothing to do with the narrative. And I think because that's the nature of creativity and technology, we'll discover all sorts of new things as we go into the future. But I do think we're currently in a sort of zone where like all the other stuff that makes up a game has sort of equalized to some extent, and we're not to the point yet where people are inventing like crazy new mechanics, and we're almost reaching like an apex of visual fidelity. Like this is a sidebar, but I read recently an article on like the crash of TV sales because they have reached, I guess, the limit of what the human eye can perceive in terms of quality. Like they literally can't do anything else because even if they did, even if it's technically better, our eye can't even tell the difference.
Yeah.
So they have no way to sell new TVs anymore because they can't sell it on picture quality because there's nowhere to go from here. And I feel like we're almost sort of reaching that point with visuals in games. Like even if it was technically better, our eye can't tell that it's any better. And
the
so
next step will be brain implant that helps you perceive the better quality.
That's right. Yeah. Make the resolution of my
reality.
eyes better.
Yeah. Completely immersive. You get pulled into the world virtually. Yeah.
Yes. But yeah, so I think narrative has emerged now, at least in the present moment, as a new differentiator, right? Like now people are like, this game's got a really good story. This game lets you branch in a bajillion different directions, like Baldur's Gate 3. This game does this game does that. So yeah, I think that's part of the reason maybe why it has risen in prominence.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean that kind of commoditization you're talking about, where it's like there's like this level that everything has kind of gotten to. It's relatively easy. Let's not get too excited about how easy it is, but it's getting easier to make games to a very high quality. Then the question is, okay, but do I love these characters? Am I resonating? Do I want to spend time, when I could be reading a book or watching a show or I guess scrolling through on the TikTok or whatever it is with these characters? And I think that's what what you guys are really bringing to the table, because it's not just the the characters and what they're saying. I mean, I do you do any of the kind of the world building aspects as well? So maybe we can jump to that for a second. Like when you're thinking about doing a lot of that of the world building, I guess I'll ask two questions. How do you approach it, and then how integrated is it with like at what stage are you guys brought in on some of the projects you've worked on? Is it like, oh, we've got a framework of gameplay and we want now give us a world to have it in? Or is it like we've got this world that is the setting for the gameplay and now let's expand on it? Like how do you guys approach it? You know what I mean? Maybe I'm not asking the question well. Yeah.
Do you want me to go first?
Go ahead, Jessica.
No, yeah. I mean, this is a question that really depends on the studio, the project, the how they're going about it. But I guess I'll tell you like what my ideal is. I think it's got to start with the world, right? Like you can come up with great gameplay, and great gameplay can work in many different worlds. But what is the world of this particular game? So I think that's got to be the first question you ask and answer. What is the story you are trying to tell here, and what is the game about? And then from there, I love a world where narrative is part of the discussion from day one, right? Like we're there from initial idea generation through pre-production all the way to the end, and we're not brought in any later. We're at there from the forefront to develop the whole game from scratch. And once you've got that basic elevator pitch of like, my game is, I'll just use Weird Song for an example. My game is an occult adventure in an alternative medieval Portugal inspired by mythology. Our shorthand is Medieval Matrix. That's the elevator pitch of the game. So what do we take from that? How do we start building the world? Okay, we know it's alternate medieval Portugal. What does that look like? How is it alternate? In what ways is it recognized?
What is alternate, right?
Yeah, what does alternate mean, and how is it alternative to real world history? You have to know the real world history in order to know how you want to deviate from it. So, figure all that out. And then you say, okay, who is in this world? How do they relate to each other? What do they care about? What's the player want? Do they want the player to get it? Do they not want the player to get it? How are they going to act to help the player, not help the player? And yeah, from there is kind of how we approach, or I approach in my history is building out the world. It all sort of comes back to like, what's the player trying to do? What do we want the player to experience and feel and experience? And how does everything else around the player help us to make the player feel and do that, right? Like it should all be serving the player experience. It's not, no one plays a game. I don't think anyone plays because they just want to like explore your world and learn like all this fake history you made up and all this and all these like,
Yeah.
ooh, they got this fake Whole Food and look at this made up government system.
Look
they
at this
made up.
fake Whole Foods.
Isn't
Yeah.
that fascinating? Like that's not why people play games. Like they want an experience. So that's what it's all got to serve, right? Like what is the experience I want you to have, and how is this all helping to tell your journey and make you feel immersed? And then one more thing, and it sort of relates to the point we were just discussing. Like I feel like people's attention now too is a lot more. There's a lot more demands on people's time, I think, than there used to be. Maybe when I was playing games when I was young. Like these days, it's gotta be really good for me to spend an hour or two completely ignoring my family for.
Yeah.
Or all the other
Yeah.
things in my life. Like I feel like, and maybe this is just getting older in general, but like that's a huge cohort of the gaming audience, right? Like it is aged. But it's a part of the younger audience too, right? Like I watch my kids and they're very into the whole like I call it the TikTok model because it's very like short time frame
Right,
experience
Roblox
burst.
or
Yeah, they're not into like the ancient, it seems ancient now, the ancient games where we would sit in front of a console for like 3 hours and play that. Like they just get impatient and they want something new like every 5 minutes at least. And again, it's like if you want to hold my attention for those longer time spans, it's really got to be good. So I think that's also something that goes into the world building, especially now, is like, is this compelling enough? Is it interesting enough? Is it really worth their time and attention? Because there's so many places they can put it these days.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Or
agreed.
even within the gaming industry, like I believe in the last 15 years, the volume of games being released has 10x'd. So
Yeah.
just in 15 years. So people have a lot more options. It's not just all of us playing the same game and talking about it. There's thousands. I think there's like over 20,000 games per year coming out
movies
now.
per year on Steam. Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah, world building too is also my favorite part. It is absolutely my favorite part of game making. My first job in the industry was the lead writer for Ultima Online 2. Poor cursed Ultima Online 2. And I went into an established IP, but they were putting it into the far future, and so there was so much world building to do. But to Jessica's point, which I think is really good, is a genre of game is a genre. It's a shooter. It's a hero collector. It's a whatever it is. But what is the world that you're immersing the person in? Right. One of the games I would love for us to do at Fateless, because it hasn't been done, is a world that reflects that Flash Gordon experience, right? Not Star Wars, not sci-fi like Destiny. Flash Gordon, a sword in one hand, a laser in the other, a planetary romance, right? I'd love to see that kind of experience. And then what could it be? Well, it could be a shooter, it could be a stealth game, it could be a role-playing game. You could apply it like Jessica was saying, you could apply it to many different genres. But what you want to capture is that feeling of Flash Gordon, right? What you will make for a vampire game and the mechanics and the world, it's going to be very different than what you make for a game about Lovecraftian horror or what you make a game about cyberpunk. Or the world does dictate what the player is going to experience within the genre. So you can make a shooter in any genre, but it's going to be different depending on what genre you choose to put it in. And that world building part, as you know, Sham, oh my God, I love.
Oh, yes.
When I'll tell you real quick, Jessica, when when Sham and I first started talking about GODFORGE, and I knew what hero collectors were, and I had a little bit of experience with it. And Sham came in and said, "Yeah, we have all the mythologies from all the world, and they've all come into the same place, and you get to pick from the world's greatest legends and gods and monsters." And I was like, "I am in. I am so in. This is fantastic. What a wonderful opportunity to come up with a world where all these people would have come together. Why have they come together? What's the lore behind? What's the story? What's happening? What are they doing now that they're all interacting?" Such a I mean, he literally tossed me a freaking diamond in the rough and said, "Hey, man, polish that baby up."
Enjoy.
And so I've been having a fantastic time. I can't wait for audiences to experience the game and to see the world and to see they're already getting into the lore. But it's so rewarding. I'm sure you agree with that, Jessica. It's just so rewarding to see somebody take such joy from something that you poured blood, sweat, and tears into for years.
I
It's
know
really fun.
my favorite thing to do, because I my childhood in fan fiction, my favorite thing to do is go find fan fiction of the games I've worked on.
Oh yeah, that's a
Even
good call.
even if it's terrible or gross or whatever, just the fact that someone got
You're liking
inspired.
it. You're like, she would never say that.
I just love that people get inspired to do it, right? Like if anything I did inspired someone to go create a piece of fan whatever, that just makes me so happy.
It's great. It's a great feeling.
You ever watch like YouTube videos of reviewing the lore of this game and be like, "What? No, they got it wrong. Like that's not what."
Yeah.
I love all of them. I love the speculations when they do those YouTube videos and they're saying, "What about this or what about that?" I'm just smiling. I'm smiling from ear to ear like the Cheshire Cat. I'm like, it could be wrong, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Engagement, like if they cared enough to engage, like you've already won, like in such a
Yeah.
huge way. Like any kind of reaction is better than just complete silence, getting lost
What
in
about the
the
ones?
pile.
Yeah.
What about the ones where they're like, I don't know if you might not have had these happen for particular games that you've worked on, but the ones where it's like how it should have ended, or that guy, or there's a bunch of different groups that do this. Do you ever get like, so it sounds like you're like, all engagement is good engagement, effectively is what you're saying, but do you ever get in there and you're like, what, you actually think that it should have, this character should have done that, or like, do you ever get kind of like fired up when you're reading through?
I think the thing with games, and that's something good about podcasts, I think, is pulling back that curtain a little bit. Like I try not to take any of that too seriously, because they just don't know, right? They don't know how development works. They don't know the constant, like very good reasons, at least on your side, why a decision had to be the way it is, even though when it comes to them, they're like, "What? This is crazy. Why on earth would you do it that way?" And there was, in fact, some very complicated technical reason why you had to do it that way. Or like,
Yeah.
if we had done it your way, it would have meant 3 months of crunch for everybody. Like
Yeah.
there's so
Right.
many unseen reasons why bad decisions get made, and what they are. And they don't. So that's why I try and take
You're kind of
a
like,
lot of
yeah,
that.
we made a decision.
I try
Fair
and take
enough.
a lot of that stuff with it, and a lot of times, like, you don't always have control over that decision either, like,
Right.
unless you're
Yeah.
director level. So it's like you can think in your head, like, "Yeah, I agree with you, but I there was nothing I could do about it. I'm sorry."
Yeah, and a lot of times those restrictions, by the way, I think help you come up with some really magical stuff, right? It's the reason they say if you're given $5 million to make a movie, you're going to do a lot more with it than if you're
Yes.
given 150 million. And I think there's a lot of that in games as well, especially as I believe this is going to be a trend. Smaller and smaller studios. The people are not trusting the AAA studios. They're going to the AA studios. They're going to indie studios because of the culture that they create, the excitement. You get people together that are just have been burned
True passion.
by the big experience, and now they just want to do something really great with a small group of very passionate co-creators. And I think those restrictions, we had our restrictions. We have our restrictions on how much we can spend on cinematics, how we can do them, all that kind of stuff. But we're trying to make the most of it so that when they do see those cinematics, they'll go, wow, they did that with not a lot of money. That's great,
Yeah.
because everyone has seen the beautiful arcane style, fully CG those things are super expensive. But
Into years.
by the way, after a while, they all start to look the same. That's another. I love Arcane, don't get me wrong, but they all start to look the same. So when you show something that people are not used to seeing, you show a cinematic in a different way, you show a different take on a cinematic, a style to a cinematic, that can become a signature look for the company, you know.
Yeah.
And I think that can be really good.
Well,
Yeah.
what was you sent me the game, I'm blanking on it right now, the Critical Role guys that you were really excited about?
Yeah. Okay, so Jessica, did you work at all with Telltale?
I didn't work with Telltale. No, on the Walking Dead game, we worked with Skybound, just a licensor. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I love the Telltale style, you know, Wolf Among Us, and you mentioned Game of Thrones. They did the Game of Thrones one, Walking Dead.
I love the Back to the Future one. That one's my favorite.
Oh
Yeah,
that
see,
was
I'm a
good.
big Back to the Future fan. I love that one.
I have
Yes.
become obsessed with a game called Dispatch, which is
Ah.
Ad Hoc Studios, which are a bunch of the founders for Telltale, working in collaboration with the Critical Role folks. And it's a superhero game where you basically are the dispatcher that is sending superheroes out to do various, you know, tasks, various good deeds. And they're all former supervillains. So already it's a great
You might
premise.
say you're dispatching them.
Yes. And so I'm become so obsessed with this, and I'm determined to have you know, Sham and the rest of the people, we have to do something with this, because we have a world where you could tell these great narratives that have nothing to do with the player, that are just all these characters. We have like 250 plus characters in our game. Well, people want to know their story too. They want to see films about them. Well, how much better would it be if it's not a passive experience, but if you're choosing what responses they're giving to each other, and how they're talking and what they're saying? And I'm so obsessed with this idea. I really want to do something like this for GODFORGE.
It's too funny because you know, the reason I brought it up was because you guys were talking about, like, oh, you know, it's tougher for AAA right now, and kind of these AA, like these spin-off studios are actually having a lot of success, and so, you know, it reminded me of that. But I think a lot of it is just that you know, and maybe you can speak to this, Jessica, as well. Have you found that you've had, you know, major limitations, I guess, when you're working with these bigger studios, and obviously with these IPs? Did you find that you enjoyed the freedom of doing whatever you wanted to with some of the smaller ones, or like, what do you enjoy more? What do you think is
Yeah,
like
you know, it really depends. Like working with a license is not necessarily any more restrictive than not working with a license. Working with a big AAA developer is not necessarily any more restrictive, or sometimes it is. It really just depends on the thing. Like
on the actual
like
group?
yeah, like our Star Trek game, for example. They pretty much we sent them a style guide early on, and they approved the style guide, and then they were like,
They were
have
like,
fun. Yeah. They were like, have fun. They trusted us to do everything from there. And so there really was no restriction, other than just setting up that initial style guide. So that was fantastic. But yeah, I think I agree completely that, restriction, limitation, breeds creativity. Those 10 years that I spent in mobile, and let me tell you what a mental shift it was going from BioWare, where you have mocap cinematics and VO and everything under the sun. And BioWare was a place at the time where they actually competed over which game had more words in it. And it was like a good thing.
More
It was
words.
it was like a good thing when your game had more. Like they had like a tracker on the wall and like who had more words. And when somebody got more words, it was like, yeah, we're winning. Are you? And you know, but that's just to illustrate that it was a place that you could basically do whatever you wanted from a narrative perspective. And then you went into mobile, and mobile is a place where it's like, okay, you get one string. It's 63 characters.
That have 6 words.
That includes the spaces and the punctuation. Go. And you you have to tell a story in one line, and all of a sudden you're like, okay, gotta Hemingway it up here. And that just like, at first it feels like impossible. Like at first you're like, I can't, no human could. How could anyone? But then you start to figure it out because you have to. And you start to realize I didn't need all those words. I really do only need 62 characters. And I'm I'm proud of everything I did at BioWare, but after those 10 years in mobile, I could pick it up and look at it and I'd be like, I could have said this in 4 words. And I used 3 lines and each line was 30 words. So I said this in 90 words and I could have said it in 4. Like, it just taught me so much about how less is more, and when you can't do everything, sometimes it's better because it forces you to get more creative and really think about, what do I really need here to tell a good story? Do I need all the bells and whistles, or would having them actually just result in something worse?
Yeah. No, I think, to your point earlier, Aaron, $5 million versus $150 million, that restriction, those restraints, those things, or the constraints really make it so you're like, well, this is what we have. This is how we're going to have to do it. Let's make it the best it possibly can be. And you're like, it sounds like you're very proud, Jessica, of what you ended up with in some of those, with some of those restrictions. And then now, do you kind of like, are you in the middle? Do you just like, well, we don't need to be 4 words here. We can maybe go to 8 or 10.
Yeah,
But I really want to.
Yeah, I think when I came back around to AAA, it had made me a better writer because I learned to be more succinct. I learned to be more elegant. Is the word I like to use about how I tell the story. I think too, what's really important, especially when you have a VO game, is to remember to leave the actor room to act. Like if you wrote this super long line that they can't think about anything but getting the line right because there's so many words in it and they're so tangled together, and like they don't have any room to act, they don't have any room to think. All they're doing is trying to get the line out, and then you got to move on because you got 80,000 other lines to under. And it just like really taught me a lot about that, because then I would get in the booth and I started to see, compared to when I would hear the VO on my first gig, how much better the performances were because I was writing less and giving them more room to act. And it just
that's interesting. Yeah, I wouldn't have thought about that, but that's a great point.
And that is, by the way, one of the things that's great about Dispatch, right? That is, I recommend any game writer watch these Dispatch shorts, because it is a lesson in economy. They say so much with so little. I think that is the best lesson you can learn, is what Jessica just said. If you can say something in 8 words that you were saying in 30, do it. Find a way to do it. Because it leaves more room for the actor. It leaves more room for the imagination of the player. They can add stuff themselves. They can put context to it that maybe you didn't even intend, right? And so I think that's when you get writing at its peak, when it's just enough to get the player's imagination going, right?
And I'm going to add too, because this is how I felt when I first started trying to shift in style. Like when you first try it, it's going to feel like bad writing. Like you're going to write that 8-word line, and you're going to be like, this is bad. This is so simple and plain. This is like, anyone could have written this. This is awful. Like that's how it's going to feel at first. But then the more you do it, and if you get the chance to see it acted out, if you get to experience it in the game, you're going to slowly start to realize this isn't bad, actually.
This isn't so bad, actually. It probably feels more natural in some ways.
Yeah.
Like
very much so.
And obviously a shortcut to coming into, getting into the mobile, if you're going to be writing for mobile, you got to learn that lesson sometime. So maybe I'll start now.
Yes.
Well, real quick. So I want to be cognizant of our time. We're getting close. I have one more question I want to definitely ask, and maybe get your guys' opinion. But then Brad is going to do the last question, which is the most important question. So do you have advice for people that are trying to get into writing, like how to approach it? I mean, other than obviously sending a small SpongeBob CD to the wrong, we've already got that part down.
Get your branded physical media and manila envelopes in order. That's the first thing to do. It's great now because when back in my day, we didn't have so much material now, right? Like what game writing was barely a job. Like when I talked about how I went into BioWare, I didn't even know game writing was a job. So I didn't aspire to be a game writer. I majored in English. I wanted to be a writer. And back then I thought I was going to go into publishing, because when I was thinking of writing, that was books. And I loved games, but I thought to work on a game, you had to be a programmer, right? The people who made games were programmers who also did all the other things. And at a point in time, that was true. Like everybody who did the game was a
Yeah.
programmer who also did other things. But by that point, things had started to differentiate. And I remember I was looking at the job listing at BioWare and I was just idly reading it because that's how big a fan I was of that company. I would just idly read their job
awesome.
listing page. And I was reading it and I read it again. I read it like, this doesn't say you need to know how to program. And it was like,
Yeah, you're like
it was
looking for
like,
specifications.
it was like that head exploding emoji where like it suddenly dawned on me. I was like, I could game right? What?
Yeah.
But now, you know, obviously it's a job and you know, there's not only degree programs for it, there's a million books, you know, written by game writers and narrative designers on the craft. There's a million podcasts, there's YouTube videos, there's classes you can take, there's certifications, there's all sorts of material out there, which is fantastic. So, you know, if you're really interested in game writing, you know, first like check a lot of this stuff out, especially the books, because you can get them from the library, which is I know every dollar is you know, precious these days. So especially start with the books, especially start with free stuff that's on YouTube, especially start with podcasts, because you can learn so much just from that stuff. And then yeah, like we were saying before we started the call, I also always tell people like people feel like they need permission. They need someone to like officially hand them like, you may now begin game writing, for I have hired you to be a game writer. And they feel like they can't do it until somebody tells them that. And I always tell people, you, especially now, you don't have to wait for anyone's permission. You don't have to wait for a job. You can write a game right now. You can get Twine. You can make yourself a playable text-based game right now. You can go jump on one of these visual novel apps that allow user submissions. You can go jump on Choices, Episodes, Tales, Dorian, any one of them that, you know, tickles your fancy and create a little visual novel for yourself that people can play. These are portfolio pieces that you can put in a portfolio and people can play. You know, and I always tell people to be curious about everything in game development, because the best game writers and narrative designers are people who take an interest in and want to genuinely understand and work with all the other disciplines, right? And the people who fail or have a hard time are the people who kind of turn their nose up at or intentionally like ignore everything else and they just want to sit in their little writer silo and put out their nice words and hand it down and be like, implement like brilliant. And that's not that's not how you find success. You know, be curious, even if you have no intention of ever doing it yourself. Be curious about how does the system designer come up with systems? How does the level designer make a level? How does any other kind? How do the artists make things? Like what the hell is Maya? What is it for? You know, like find these things out. Even if you're not going to use them, it's just going to make your work better because you know, your work has to meet the reality of the actual gameplay experience, right? Like it all looks great on a page, but then when you get it in the game and what the character's saying has nothing to do with what they're doing, you know,
It's not gonna feel good. Yeah.
it doesn't work. So yeah, those are probably my three biggest pieces of advice for people. You know, be curious. Don't wait for anyone's permission. Avail yourself of this era of lots and lots and lots of knowledge in this field, which the rest of us sort of had to fumble and figure out on our own.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, my three are pretty easy. Play games, especially the kind of games that you want to make. And then because, again, of my background, study screenwriting, study dialogue the way it's written for television and for the screen. And not to say that novelists cannot find, obviously, Jessica's the living proof, novelists can find success, but more and more games are sounding like movies and television. And sometimes novel writing is different. Dialogue in novels is different from screen dialogue. So study that. And then the third one, run RPGs, run an RPG to really stretch your creative muscles. If you want immediate feedback from an audience that you have right there, you want to test out a line or a situation or a plot or a twist or whatever, you can do that. So those would be my three. And yes, there's so much to look up now. Just do a search on game writing on YouTube, and you will be hit with hundreds of videos of people opining on what to do and how to do it.
I agree
love it.
so much with that. I just wanted to plus two of those things, like especially screenwriting to a lot of games, especially when you're working with licensors. You will need to write in screenplay format. And even if you're not working with licensors, some places their pipeline and processes just they prefer scripts. Sometimes that's what VO actors want. Like they can't do a spreadsheet; they need a traditional script. So yeah, learning screenwriting. Just get yourself a copy of the Screenwriter's Bible. Like if you haven't done it before, like learn how to write a screenplay, because invariably at some point you're going to need to produce a screenplay if you work in game. And then yeah, I agree. Oh my god, it just flew out of my head. The screenwriting. What was the other thing you said?
With RPG or playing games.
Yeah, play
RPG.
RPGs.
Yes. Yeah. So I'm gonna say that the improv nature of being in a tabletop game or an RPG, that's gonna come in handy. And you probably never thought about it, but it will, because I can't tell you the number of times that I have been in a VO booth and they're like, I can't do this line. This line isn't working. Give me a new one. And you just have to
Yeah.
on the spot come up with an equally brilliant line that works.
Yeah.
Or in any kind of brainstorming session. Yeah, those skills are just really helpful in game writing and probably many other kinds of writing. So I agree.
Well, it trains you. I mean, right? If you give a situation in a role-playing game and you're expecting a certain response, and the player out of left field does something you don't expect, you have to immediately come up with something good. Yeah, exactly. And so that's good training, right? It trains your instincts. Like, okay, I was going to go funny with this, but that's not the right direction. I'm going to go serious with it now, or vice versa. And so it's just such wonderful training. So
it's that perfect GIF or GIF, whatever your preferred defense.
Yeah.
Whatever your jam is.
But the person watching as the other person tries to put the shapes in the hole, and they're like expecting them to put the star in the star hole, and they just turn it and put it in the square hole, and they're like, no, that's not what you're supposed to do.
That's too funny. I love that we got such different answers, but both really great answers, and it's just very that's amazing. Okay, so Brad, we got to ask the most important question. This is the one I've been waiting for, honestly. Let's do it.
Awesome. Yeah. So Jessica, one thing we like to do, for people's first time on the channel is, since we are running GODFORGE, which is a hero collector of all these myths and legends from all the different lores in the world, do you have a specific hero or lore that you think is your favorite? Like, oh, it would be so awesome if this person was a hero in GODFORGE.
Yeah, I don't have a specific character, but I have a sort of like challenge, food for thought thing for you guys. And forgive me if you have already got plans for this. I did not have the opportunity to go through all your guys' materials and see what you're planning. But so on the game I worked on, Weird Song, Something Way Games, because it was based in medieval Portugal. This was a period of, and I am getting to the answer. I promise this is not a huge tangent. Because it was based in the world of medieval Portugal, this was a big historically important time in Portugal history where there was a clash of multiple cultures and religions over the region. And that required me to dive a lot into the various religions of the place, especially those that I did not have a lot of personal experience with, right? I was raised Christian, so that's the one I know most about. But I had to learn a lot about Islam. I had to learn a lot about Judaism. I had to learn a lot about everything. And you think you have a basic understanding of these rules, but then you start digging into them and talking to consultants. You're like, actually, I didn't know a gosh darn thing about this. So learning a lot about that and figures, and that's something that because that game drew a lot about mythology. I know it's sort of a hot thing to call any kind of figure from religions that the world still practice mythological.
We had to discuss this.
Because it's funny because we've got all these figures from, like, for example, Greek and Roman mythology, and we call them myths. I guess because no one is worshiping Zeus anymore, but it's like at the time it was just as much of a valid religion as the ones we still practice. And so my challenge / food for thought to you guys is like, is there a way to incorporate the figures, the legends that are part of religions that are still being practiced today, right? Like, is there a way to at least pay homage to Moses? Like, is there a way to at least pay homage to Ishmael? Is there a way to pay homage to this is a weird superpower, but Mary's sister who had a baby at like 72 or something, I guess, is there a way to bring those figures that are sort of the same tradition into this world somehow and acknowledge them, if they're not, straight analogs. So that's something that I think is a challenge, and I'd love to see if somebody was able to tackle it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's go ahead.
It's definitely a challenge. We have discussed several instances like that with the team, and
Live religions.
yeah, we
Yeah.
want to be always, of course, respectful
Yes,
to
yeah.
the culture. We want to honor the traditions and the myths and the folk tales. But yeah, at the end of the day, right? It's a game, and this is one of the things that I told Sham. It's like, if I'm taking a figure that people actively believe in today, and I'm writing dialogue for them, and I'm putting them in this situation, it's like it just
they're
makes me
fighting
feel
and
it makes me feel
dying,
awkward,
let's
right?
say,
It makes
Yeah,
me feel
yeah.
like,
in
what?
battle.
How dare I put words in the words of Lord Ganesh, right? It's
Mhm.
like, and so it is such a tricky thing, as you might imagine. But I would love to see different. We were just talking about this on our Discord. Is I want to bring more African religions. Africa's filled with astounding mythologies and gods and heroes. I mean, it is really underrepresented. I would love to bring them in. I'd like to bring in some Polynesian Maori myths. I'd like to bring in just all these different cultural beliefs and myths that I'd love to bring into the game. But yeah, always, like, when it comes to any established, whether it be Islam, Judaism, Christianity, you have to be super respectful
Yeah,
and be very cautious before you say, yes, I'm going to put,
right.
a Muhammad figure in here, or I'm going to put, a Jesus figure in here.
Jesus,
It's like,
or,
oh, yeah, it
Yeah,
gets very tricky.
I'd love to see. I think, as you said, above all, need to be respectful, need to be authentic. I would love though to see us move towards at least trying more. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like that fear has made people back away very far from stuff like
Yeah,
that anymore, because
yeah,
everyone's afraid of getting it wrong. And it's great that they care about that. That's a huge improvement over the past when no one cared. Um,
yeah,
but I think too, it has made us maybe sometimes too hesitant to try and, shine a light on things. And whenever possible, people who are of whatever it is should be involved in doing it. But I think that shouldn't also mean like everyone else can't, or shouldn't. I'd
yeah,
love to
yeah,
see more of, and not just uh
just in
but
general, you're
yeah,
saying,
just
yeah.
in general.
yeah,
I'd love to see
yeah,
more people try and just try,
I
Let's
think
find
that's
a
right.
way
I mean,
how it works.
I so agree with that sentiment. I think that there's definitely a fear of even discourse, of discussing with people anything, like opposing opinions about anything.
Yeah.
It could be religion, could be politics, could be whatever. I wholeheartedly agree with that. Like, I wish people would just sit down and have a discussion if there's conflict, and then that we can feel that, like, hey, if someone's representing something and they're doing it respectfully, and or trying to do it, that you don't think of it
Yeah.
as like, oh, well, that, that we're appropriating it, or oh, that's disrespectful. It's like,
Well, it's also, I think, how people then go and learn the reality, right? Like,
yeah,
my favorite game series of all time is Quest for Glory, which was the Quest for Glory series made by Sierra in the 90s. And every game in that series is based on the culture and mythology of a different region of the world. Um, and I am a white girl who went to Catholic school in Ohio. I don't know, know anything, you know, and but playing these games sort of introduced me to
into
a
the
lot of
world.
this stuff. Yeah, in a very broad, obviously, sensationalized and fictionalized way. but it got me interested, and I would later go off and like look up this stuff that I knew was real in some capacity, and then I'd learn about it, and I'm like, oh, this isn't exactly what the game said it was, but now I know about it, and it's cool, it's interesting. I never, ever, ever would have looked any of that up if it wasn't for the game, like introducing it to me and getting me interested in it. So.
Expanded worldview. I mean, and even like satire does the same thing. Like even when it isn't done, and I'm not saying that people should do this, but even when it's not done in a respectful way, it's like, hang on, is that really the way that I feel like the whole point of it is exchange of ideas, whether those ideas are ones that you agree with isn't even the point. It's just that like, what that will do is people can do whatever they want, right? It's just, some people will I guess there's a culture now of kind of like canceling things, right? Something got you frustrated or you didn't like it, and then so you just go out and you shout about it and stuff like that. I feel like that culture is what leads people to be fearful kind of doing these types of things, right? Because if you do something, even if you were trying your best and then you get canceled, that's not great. That's not great for you or your company or whatever you were trying to do. So yeah,
if all I ever felt allowed to write about was the experience
your own personal
of a white heterosexual Catholic girl from Ohio, like I wouldn't create much that was of interest to you.
Yeah. Well, and it's also really gratifying and rewarding, right? We had a fan on our Discord talking about, I'm imagining that this fan is probably Latin American. He was so happy, or she was so happy, that we were including Mesoamerican gods. I mean, they were delighted. That's just not something you see a lot. And so when we introduce these characters in the game, the hope is someone's going to say, I want to learn more about this Tezcatlipoca guy. Like, what is up with that? And they look him up, and then they immerse themselves in that mythology, in that culture, which is why I want to bring in African mythology. I mean, there's just so much. Our world is filled with such beautiful things, and so many of us never have a chance to experience or explore them. And I hope we can help people do that.
Awesome. I mean, that was a great answer. That it was a non-answer. I'm just gonna say, we didn't actually get an answer here. But
and by the way, Jessica, you had me here. If you had picked a character, I could make it happen. I can make it happen, Jessica.
I threw Moses out there, man. Like, let me go.
Oh yeah, but Moses is tricky.
All right, let my people go. We'll work on it.
Yeah. Well, hey, Jessica, this has been a blast. Thanks for joining us for the discussion. It's been really fun to meet you. And Sham, Aaron, great to see you again. And for all of you, we will have links down below if you want to pop into the Discord or anything like that to discuss things like narrative or whatever is happening in the world of GODFORGE. So thanks, everybody. And we'll see you soon in the next Fateless podcast episode. Cheers.